Welcome to Earth Mysteries. Today we're going to look at the fascinating subject of polygonal walls. What's a polygonal wall? It's made up of polygonal stones, many-sided, many-angled. And such walls, even pavements, are found throughout the world. Who built them? When did they build them? Why did they build them? How have they withstood time, withstood earthquakes? I've always called them Lemurian walls, believing that they extend far back in time, maybe tens of thousands of years, back into the time of Mu. But we're going to take a journey and at least discover what makes up a polygonal wall, why are they special, and perhaps we will get an insight into their purpose then, and maybe their purpose now. Are you ready to travel? Let's go. So here we are. This is a typical polygonal wall in the streets of Cusco in Peru. You can see the many-sided or many-angled stone. Very unique, very beautiful. And there's also an image here of the pillow effect. The pillow effect is that these stones appear to bulge. And it's said maybe the stones were softer when they first were laid into the wall, and therefore they pillowed on each other. But there are other wonderful features of these stones. Here we have another wall in Sacsayhuaman near Cusco in Peru. You'll see how the stones are curved to fit into each other, and in fact curve in order to create the meeting between two walls. We see that many times. How did they create those curves? And what is even more magical, of course, is that there is no evidence of mortar or clay being used to hold the stones together. That's so unique. And as you can see here, this is a beautiful 12-sided stone in one of the streets of Cusco. Magical. So how did they fit these stones together so that even a piece of paper cannot slide between the joint? Some people talk about heat being applied. They have looked at maybe the mineral content, the molecular structure at the side where two stones join. Has there been a strong heat applied and therefore the chemical constituency of those stones changed? Maybe. Other people say, well, they use plant fluid, something that may have either softened the stone or made the stone slide together easier. Maybe it's something else. But all I can say is that even with all the research we have today, nobody has really come up with a solution. And then how were they lifted? Some of these stones are between 25 to 200 tons of andesite, really heavy. Were they lifted by giants? And this idea has gone on to say, well, yes, maybe the people who built these walls were taller, maybe 9 foot, 10 foot. Therefore, we know that there have been skeletons found that have that height. We know that some of these sites have doorways that are much higher than we are now. It's really possible that the people then were much taller, but still, could they lift 200 tons? And the reason that some of these stones are called Cyclopean stones is that Cyclops was seen as a giant who had one eye in the center of his forehead. And then hence the name Cyclops. And if Cyclops did use his own powers to lift these stones, the idea may be that he raised his energy, what we call his Kundalini energy, up his spine, focused it into his third eye, set an intention, and maybe by also applying sound, was able to lift these stones. So frequency plus intention leads to manifestation. And maybe the power of intention being very strong in the third eye. Or maybe there were other anti-gravitational methods that were used then. Methods that we haven't yet discovered. But the very idea that you could lift something against gravity, maybe that they understood the limitations when we talk about time and space. Maybe they didn't feel that they were limited by those parameters, and therefore were able to move something just by moving through space. These are ideas, and I think they're ideas that we're now starting to discover through quantum physics and other different forms of physics. We are still in wonder at how anybody would have lifted such heavy stones. And then there are these protrusions. I have placed my hands on these protrusions. Are they energy fulcrums? Are they to do with sound? I certainly can feel an increase in energy when I'm touching them. And if you say, well, it's just the way in which the stone was designed, I don't think so. Because if you've gone to all the bother of creating these wonderful, precise fitting stones, I don't think you'd just say, well, let's leave that protrusion, it doesn't matter. I think they're there for a purpose, and we find them throughout the world. They could also be points where the energy gathers together to create an interdimensional portal. There's another idea. But again, having listened to so many people speak about them, nobody as yet has come up with a solution. And here's another little feature. It's called a keystone. These tiny little stones that are designed to bring stones together, other stones together. Here it is in Easter Island. And then recently I saw it here in the Assyrian, a beautiful underground temple in Egypt. The design is the same, even though it's thousands of miles apart. And this is what amazes me, is that we do find these wonderful walls across continents. So here I was walking in Delphi in Greece amongst the Apollo temple, and I went, there's a polygonal wall. It wasn't what I had expected. I had expected to come and see these temples built by the Greeks. But here was a wall, or in fact a platform made up of polygonal stones. And they had just literally built the temple on top of it. So who built the original wall or platform, and why? And I don't think it was just, well, we could put a nice platform there. I think this was there long time ago for a specific reason. We'll be looking at some of those reasons. Here is another wall in the Ise Shrine in Japan. Now this isn't a part of the actual temple complex. This is a wall that surrounds the shrine. But still, this is a polygonal wall. Very precise. And I'm going to talk about the importance of these places and perhaps why we find these walls here. Now, here's another place, Easter Island. This time it's like a platform. So you've got these really powerful, large stones that are as deep as they are wide as they are long. And then there's the Kaimanara Wall, or near Taupo in New Zealand. I share my insights of this in another video, but many archaeologists or geophysicists would like to say, well, look, this is just a natural formation. But doesn't it look like a polygonal wall? And if it is natural, how come the lines are so precise? They're not diagonal, they are vertical and horizontal. And here's some other images from Egypt, from the Giza Plateau. So on the left is actually from Abydos, the Assyrian. You can see again these protrusions, those sonar nodes. Again, they're there. And then when you go to the Giza Plateau, you see top right, the Valley Temple. These are not part of the pyramids. The pyramids are not necessarily built from a polygonal wall, although there is evidence that they were there, that these walls may have been there as an outer casing. But this is a temple that is right at the level of the Sphinx. How old is this? Is it the same age as the Sphinx? The same age as the pyramids? Nobody knows. But it has these beautiful walls. And then we have the causeway that runs down from the second pyramid, the middle pyramid. And it's made up of these polygonal stones again. And whereas you might just say, well, they're only surface, they're just maybe 3 or 6 inches high. No, they are blocks of stones as deep as they are long. Something about creating a causeway of this type of stone masonry was important to the people. And if we look at, we're back into a street in Cusco, we see that the Inca themselves admitted that they didn't build these polygonal walls. They said, no, we built the ones at the top, those new ones, where we kind of use very square stones. But the other ones, they don't know who built those. We call them pre-Inca. But what we do know is that those very polygonal stones withstand earthquakes, possibly because they are laid on very tiny stones so that when there is an earthquake, they move on those tiny stones. There's a theory. I haven't been able to see whether or not such stones, tiny stones, are underneath all the polygonal walls. But it's true to say that in many of the places that I've shown you, Delphi, Issy Shrine, Easter Island, they are all on fault lines. They are all volcanic and earthquake areas. And we're going to talk about maybe this has relevance to why they were built in these places. All of them have had to withstand earthquakes at some time. Could this be on Easter Island a landing platform for UFO vehicles? Could it have not just been a landing platform on its own, but did the actual stone hold energy? Just as we know that the pyramids probably were energy producers, could these stones also have held energy? There is a theory by Dr. Derek Cunningham who suggests that each angle of these polygonal stones has a numerical value that resonates with the movements of the earth, the sun, the moon. In other words, that there's a language, a mathematical language actually imbued into the stone. And maybe it's not just a language so we can go, oh, look, it is, we have a language, but it's actually a resonance, a frequency, so that these different angles tell us about how long it takes for the moon to go round the earth, or how far the earth is from the sun. Maybe it's just this wonderful harmonics that are built into the stone that makes them so important to resonate and to bring alive, to bring heaven onto earth. And perhaps all that knowledge is actually stored in the crystalline structure of the stone itself. Just as we know that crystals in computers actually store knowledge, these stones are all crystalline. Maybe that was their use, why they chose certain stones. This is a beautiful site called Coricancha in Cusco in Peru, a beautiful temple. And then there are megalithic walls that are not like others. And this is something that I've noticed, that we call them polygonal. So you could say that a rectangular stone is polygonal. It has many sides. But what I'm fascinated by is those that have more than 4 sides or more than 4 angles. When we find those walls, what do those places have in common? Are they portals to the center of the world? Or do they have access to the Earth's serpentine creative energy? Is there something that the ancient people knew about? And that's why they built these walls, these places. So I looked at some of these places. So here we have Delphi in Greece. And this is seen as the center, the navel of the Greek culture. And the story is that Apollo sent two crows, one east, one west, and where they met, he saw as the navel of the Greek culture, Delphi. And he placed the sacred Omphalos stone there, Omphalos meaning the umbilical cord. So what he was saying is, in this place, we have access to the center of the earth. It's what we call the axis mundi. It is the sacred tree of life. So through this place, you can access the center of the earth. And why was that important to them? Because they saw the center of the earth as the axis point to the center of the sun, the center of the galaxy, the center of the universe. And so this is one story. And the Omphalos stone, as you may see, has all these lines on it. And what did that mean? The lines on the stone actually meant many directions. From this place, there are many directions. And we have something very similar in Easter Island. The navel of the world, a sacred birthing cord of the world. And then the Issei Shrine is sacred to the Shinto tradition, where they venerate the creative forces of nature found in the trees and the rocks. Again, center of their tradition. And for the Inca, Cusco is seen as the navel of the world. In Aymara language, Cusco means the rock of the owl, because their leader became an owl to choose the site for the new Inca Empire. When he found that place, he turned himself into a rock to mark the chosen site. So we have birds, we have rocks, we have stones, and we have the center of a civilization or an empire. So just to recap, we don't know the full mechanism of why these were built in this way. We do think they are somewhere between 10 to 50,000 years old. Are they built by the Atlanteans, the Lemurians? Were they built just to withstand earthquakes? Or do they contain knowledge? Do they contain wisdom? Do they contain insights about gravity, anti-gravity, the power of sound, the power of intention, interdimensional doorways? I'll leave you to think about that. There will be a deep dive where you can enter into a place like Sassawoman and talk to the stones and listen to them. So please do join me on that deep dive. Until then, I wish you well. I wish you happiness. And I'll see you again now. Bye-bye.